Steve, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about the zMAX. We're having a lot of fun with it. We just started shipping it in the last few weeks, and we're basically getting to know our new toy.
All right. Ready to talk about it?
Sure.
So Steve, what is the zMAX?
It's a solution to a long-standing problem, which is simply a traditional amp switcher won't compensate for the impedance of mismatched heads and cabs. So the simple answer is it solves that problem. And it extends on that by making it a programmable setup so that you can pick which amp, pick which cab, pick which impedance for both, and store it as a preset. So it's convenience, it's problem solving, and it has a couple of other little trick features that are just, again, all about convenience and functionality. For example, it has a remote jack that you can switch other things with, like an amp, or if you're using it with the power station, you can switch the effects loop and the channels on the PS100, for example, from the zMAX or from the foot switch that goes with it. Or you can use a foot switch on the zMAX to tell it to switch the foot switching functions of the power station 100. In my travels, I'm always looking for an alternate way to do something once I've utilized the features and functions of the gear that I have, and like, oh, I could just use one more little way to access this feature or this function, but I've used up all of what I've got so far. So sometimes a little redundancy is nice, and the zMAX provides that by giving you not only a remote jack that will switch other things, two other things specifically, whether it's the loop and the channels on the PS100 or channel switching on whatever other amp you're using it with. It's just a nice little thing to have. And what's called quick switch, which is a simple 2-button foot switch input jack that you can assign to do a variety of different things. For example, you can select between one of two already pre-written or newly written MIDI presets. So it's like a MIDI controller with one button on it, MIDI 1, MIDI 2. It also has a secondary function which controls the control functions of the zMAX. Now, it's got a loop bypass switch that's accessible in the front panel, or foot switchable, or MIDI switchable. It's got external 1 and 2, which are the remote jack functions. One does, in this example, we're using it to switch the channels on the PS100. The other one we're using for the effects loop on the PS100. The nice thing about the quick switch is the second function, besides the one that does MIDI 1 and 2, the control function part of it, you can assign any of those three functions to that second button on the switch and store them on top of the existing MIDI preset. So you don't have to erase your MIDI preset. You can just plug the foot switch in, add its functions that you want to add to the existing MIDI preset, and then when you're done with it, you can unplug it and hit store again, and it'll erase it or it'll keep it, whatever you want to do. So it's just a nice way to go, I don't want to get out my MIDI controller to go through all this rigmarole just for two stupid things. That was really the mentality behind Quick Switch. Then in the course of working with it, we discovered that there was some additional benefits of having the transformer in there. One of them is that you could safely engineer a mismatch. Like if you want to use an 8 ohm head into a 16 ohm cab and you want it to stay 8 and 16, you want it to stay mismatched, you can select a mismatch knowing that your amp is operating safely and your cabinet is not going to be harmed by that. And then you get the benefit of this little mid bump that you often get when you mismatch a head and cabinet. So that was a nice little feature. And another thing we discovered was by having the transformer in there, if you run a long cable length from the switcher to a cabinet, those long cable lengths are going to attenuate the sound a little bit. The volume level and the frequency response are going to shrink just a small, subtle amount. To some people, that's not subtle. It's a deal breaker for some people. This is why people go for high-end cables and try to get around. I need the head over there. I need the cab way over there. I need to deal with the problem of no matter how much money I spend on a cable, I still can hear some of the artifacts of that long cable. Throw an amp switcher into that mix, and now you've got double the length of cable depending on where the amp switcher is in relationship to your head and cab. So one of the nice benefits of the matching transformer is that it acts like a way station, like a transfer station between the head, a long cable, another long cable, and the cab. So you basically notice less sonic degradation with long cables using the zMAX with the transformer engaged, and you can engage it and disengage it at will. So there will be times when you want to make sure the transformer is operating. There will be times that you will want it to be out of the way entirely and have a completely transparent signal path. You can do it both ways. In fact, you can set presets so that you can A/B it and hear it both ways. You won't really hear a sonic difference, but what you will notice is that under certain circumstances, one will get closer to what you're hearing in your head and accomplishing that, and as opposed to the other setting. And that's just a sort of position to take. Which way do I like it? So all of that was factored into the zMAX. It was, the idea was, it's not just an amp switcher with a transformer in it, it's an amp switcher that has a lot of the conveniences that other amp switchers didn't think about, because they don't think about how players really use gear and what kind of stresses they're under when they're at a gig and everything needs to work, and I don't want to hear any artifacts, I don't want to have any problems, I don't want to hear any hums, I don't want to hear any pops, clicks, any of that stuff. So it was really sort of finely engineered to address not just the convenience of being able to switch between stuff, but make sure that it doesn't insert itself into your rig in some negative way or another.